I'm often asked about the content on Peace Quest and the relevance of human excellence to our daily lives. To answer that question, we need to look into academic research over the past 50 to 60 years and also prove that if there are, for instance, two approaches, right? And approach A is better than approach B, right? And if we establish through academic research that approach B definitely has impact, it means that approach A would also have impact, number one. And number two, it would be much deeper impact because approach A is better than approach B. In this case, let's say approach B is an unintentional, unplanned approach that merely connects an individual to religion, right? Whereas approach A is specifically designed and delivered content with set objectives to transform lives through spiritual connection, right? So Richard Freeman was a professor at Harvard University. He conducted a study back in 1986, which was helpful in turning our attention to religion in general as a factor helping at-risk youth becoming resilient, which means that staying out of trouble despite living in the neighborhoods where crime occurs all around them. And even though there was no specific approach or tailored approach or specific content developed and delivered, so Freeman found that more frequent church attendance was enough to improve academic performance and also bring some positive employment indicators, right? So Byron Johnson took this work by Freeman a step further. What he did was that he conducted an objective and most exhaustive review of 272 studies on religion and crime, which were published between 1944 and 2010. So it's about a period of 66 years. And all of those studies had used different methods, samples, and research designs. So the conclusions of that study are fascinating. So for instance, the more one is involved in religious activities, the less likely one will get involved in criminal acts. And we must remember that this is about mere involvement with religion. There's no specifically targeted courses or content developed to prevent crime and extremism, right? 90% of the studies reported an inverse or beneficial relationship between religion and some measure of crime or delinquency. That means that increasing religiosity is associated with decreasing crime and delinquency. The frequency of attending religious services significantly lowers the likelihood that young black males living in poverty would commit illegal activities, use drugs, or be involved in drug selling. The probability of committing a non-drug crime was reduced by 39% for youth who merely attended church services more than once a week, compared to youth who did not attend church. The probability of drug use decreased by 46% for those who attended church, and the probability of youth selling drugs reduced by 57% when comparing regular church attendees to non-attendees. And interestingly, many of the resilient youth came from the households which were headed by only one parent, which is a factor that otherwise increases the likelihood of criminal activity. And then the last highlight that I could pull from that study is that active participation in church appears to play a critical protective role in fostering social control and making youth resilient to negative influences of living in disadvantaged environments. So these highlights or these conclusions from the review of 272 studies over a period of 66 years clearly show that there is an overwhelming empirical evidence of an inverse relationship between increased spirituality and some measure of crime or delinquency. Even if the content were not prepared and delivered with the intent to prevent crime, the impact was substantial, right? And then you can imagine the impact if the spiritual content is specifically designed and combined with scientific evidence and information, and delivered with clear objectives and intention of addressing hate and violence in the targeted group to inspire spiritual growth, right? And that spiritual factor actually matters in meaningful ways for hate, violence, and crime prevention. And that's a factor that's been forgotten, but that's one of the most important factor and one of the least used approach to hate and violence prevention.